Ever wondered what daily life was like for baby boomers back in the 1950s? Well, you're going to have a lot of fun right now. Today, we're diving into 20 popular things that were an integral part of their lives. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the experience. Number 20. Watching shows on a black and white TV. Now let's talk about something that might seem ancient to the younger generation. Watching shows on a black and white TV. While Gen Zers enjoy the luxury of streaming platforms and vibrant smart TVs, baby boomers had a different experience, one that involved a monochromatic screen and some manual effort. Back then, Hollywood faced its greatest challenge from the relatively new medium of television. Although TV technology had been around since the late 1920s, it wasn't until the post-World War II economic boom that it became a household staple. By 1955, half of all American homes had a television, marking a significant shift in entertainment consumption. The limited number of major networks brought a variety of programs to those black and white screens. From situation comedies and variety shows to game shows, soap operas, and talk shows, the options were diverse. In the late 1950s, iconic shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best presented an idealized image of white suburban family life. Happy housewives, wise fathers, and mischievous yet not dangerously rebellious children became constants on the small screen. These shows didn't just entertain, they played a role in shaping perspectives on values like individualism and family, values that were defined as American in contrast to perceived communist collectivism. But it wasn't all about family sitcoms.
Were realistic and mature in a way that was unprecedented for TV.
Westerns gained popularity, emphasizing unity in the face of danger and the ability to survive in hostile environments. And let's not forget the emergence of programming tailored specifically for children. Shows like Captain Kangaroo, Romper Room, and the Mickey Mouse Club were designed to capture the imagination of the baby boom generation. Number 19. Shopping at the 5 and dime store. Those were the good old days before the era of Target, Amazon, and Walmart. Let's take a stroll down memory lane and explore the charming world of the 5 and dime store, a place where you could find just about everything you needed. Believe it or not, the concept of the 5 and dime store dates back to 1879, courtesy of the visionary minds at Woolworths. These stores were the go-to spots for affordable and cheerful shopping, offering a variety of products at, you guessed it, 5 or 10 cents. It was a shopping haven for many until the rise of megastores like Walmart and the convenience of online shopping with Amazon. Back then, you didn't need a massive retail giant to get your essentials. The dime store, also known as 5 and 10 cent stores and variety stores, were a major player in U.S. retailing. They provided an array of merchandise at unbeatable prices and catered to the needs of diverse customers, from European immigrants to rural Americans who flocked to the cities. These stores followed the department store concept, offering a wide variety of goods, from housewares and toys to notions or sewing supplies, china, glassware, stationery, shoes, and even Christmas ornaments. You name it, they had it.
Would have been an old-fashioned toy, a rubber band gun.
Candies and toiletries also became big sellers over time. What set these stores apart was their ability to offer affordable merchandise, thanks to the booming U.S. manufacturing industry. Variety store chains even sent buyers to Europe to scout for unique and inexpensive products. And who could forget the iconic lunch counters? Woolworths, in particular, became the world's largest seller of restaurant food, with its lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, gaining international fame in 1960 during a sit-in demanding service for black customers. Today, a part of that counter is proudly displayed in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. Number 18. Looking through Sears catalog. I remember Sears catalogs well. They were a trove of wonders that brought the world of shopping right to your doorstep. Do you remember flipping through its pages, filled with excitement at all the possibilities? Back in the day, Sears was the reigning king of mail-order shopping in the United States. Despite the slowdown in the mail-order boom with the rise of automobiles, Sears managed to stay ahead of the curve. With its innovative no-money-down policy and the opening of its first retail store in Chicago in 1924, Sears paved the way for a new era of consumer convenience.
$1 in 1902 is worth about $30 today.
Expanding its offerings beyond just mail-order goods, Sears introduced iconic brands like Kenmore appliances and Craftsman tools during the 1920s. The company even ventured into auto insurance, launching Allstate in 1931. Despite the challenges of the Great Depression, Sears thrived, with its catalog, retail, and factory profits soaring to over $12 million by 1931. While high-end department stores focused on luxury fashion, Sears carved its niche by offering affordable yet essential items like socks, underwear, towels, and bedding. This strategic move ensured steady sales even during the Depression. By the end of the 1930s, Sears had doubled its retail presence, and in 1945, it surpassed the monumental milestone of $1 billion in sales. Fast forward to the 1950s, and Sears had become a household name, with over 700 stores across the United States and expansions into Mexico and Canada. As shopping malls began to dot the American landscape, Sears stores stood tall as familiar anchors, alongside other retail giants like JCPenney and Montgomery Ward. Number 17. Eating with the family every night. We all grew up gathered around the dinner table as a family, a practice that was practically sacred for baby boomers growing up. Can you imagine a time when dinner wasn't just about eating, but about coming together to share stories and catch up on each other's lives? Back in those days, having dinner together was non-negotiable. Whether you were finishing up homework or playing outside, everything had to be wrapped up in time for dinner, no exceptions. And if you were hanging out at a friend's house, you could bet that you'd be joining their family for dinner too. Our meals were simple yet satisfying. Breakfast meant a bowl of wholesome cereal like Wheaties, with the added bonus of reading about athletes and other interesting folks on the box. And snacks between meals, forget about it. Our homes weren't stocked with sodas, chips, or candy. Those were reserved for special occasions. Now let me tell you about dinner time etiquette. It was a serious affair. No tipping back in chairs, no elbows on the table, and heaven forbid you didn't finish your vegetables. Dessert privileges could be revoked in an instant. But going out to eat, that was a whole different ballgame. It was a rare treat, and we had to be on our best behavior. I remember being served my very own mocktail, a Shirley Temple, while my brother got his hands on a Roy Rogers. Funny how they were essentially the same drink, just with different names. Number 16. Sock hops. I love the nostalgic feel of the sock hop. It brings to mind poodle skirts, leather jackets, and the smooth sounds of rock and roll. But before we dive into the details of how to attend or host a sock hop, let's take a trip down memory lane and uncover the fascinating history behind this beloved dance craze. Sock hops, those informal school dances synonymous with the 1950s, were more than just a chance for teens to let loose on the dance floor. They were a cultural phenomenon, a cherished tradition that brought communities together and created lasting memories for generations to come. Originating as informal gatherings in school gymnasiums during the mid-1900s, sock hops provided a safe and supervised place for teens to socialize and groove to the latest hits. But why the name sock hop, you ask? Well, participants were encouraged to kick off their shoes and dance in their socks to prevent scuffing the gym floor, hence the term sock hop. Some folks even refer to them as socks hops, record hops, or simply hops. Fast forward to today, and the spirit of the sock hop lives on through themed dance parties that pay homage to the 1950s era.
Today we're having a sock hop at the Fender Theater Experience.
These modern-day sock hops are more than just dances. They're immersive experiences that transport attendees back in time. Picture hula hoop competitions, limbo contests, hopscotch challenges, and even a game of pin the tail on the poodle. And for the ultimate retro vibe, why not incorporate roller skating into the mix? Hosting your sock hop at a roller rink adds a layer of nostalgia and fun. While many sock hops are still hosted as school or church events, individuals with a penchant for themed parties can also throw their own sock hop bash for family and friends. It's a chance to dust off those poodle skirts and leather jackets, crank up the jukebox, and dance the night away like it's 1959. Number 15. Playing out in the street. There was a time when you got to play out in the street, where the neighborhood was your playground, and the only rule was to be back home when the street lights flickered on. Baby boomers reminisce about a time when the streets echoed with the laughter and joy of children engaged in wholesome outdoor play. Back in the 1950s, children's playtime was a vibrant scene right outside their homes. Unlike today, where safety concerns confine outdoor activities to cul-de-sacs and supervised spaces, the streets were the go-to arena for childhood adventures. With fewer cars and reduced traffic, the streets were safer for games that required space and movement.
Yes. And if you put your hand on it and rub it.
The simplicity of play during this era is a stark contrast to the digital age's complex video games. Boomers recall the joy of games that required minimal equipment, footballs for impromptu matches, hula hoops twirling around, skipping ropes slapping the pavement, and decks of cards for endless possibilities. These were the tools of the trade for a generation that found boundless entertainment in the simplest of toys. Parents of that time often had a more hands-off approach to their kids' playtime. With less awareness of every move their child made, kids were left to their own devices, fostering a sense of independence and creativity. Some boomers even share fond memories of being gently nudged out of the house by guardians, encouraging them to explore and find adventures beyond the doorstep. The absence of smartphones and video games meant that afternoons were dedicated to outdoor escapades with neighborhood friends. Traditional games like hopscotch and hide-and-seek were not just activities, they were rites of passage, shaping the childhood experiences of an entire generation. Number 14. Reading comic books. Travel back to the 1950s, a fascinating era for comic book enthusiasts. As we delve into the pages of comic book history, we encounter a dynamic period known as the Atomic Age, where superheroes took a back seat, making way for a diverse array of genres like war, westerns, science fiction, romance, crime, and horror. In the aftermath of World War II until the mid-1950s, some refer to this period as the Atomic Age of comic books, a distinctive chapter often considered part of the Golden Age.
And generally putting a positive spin on a very tragic.
During this time, the superhero craze experienced a lull, leading publishers to explore new territories and narratives to captivate readers. DC Comics underwent shifts, with titles like Superboy, Aquaman, and Green Arrow finding new homes in adventure comics, paving the way for fresh storytelling and more fun comics. The landscape of comics was evolving. Superheroes faced cancellation or genre conversions, reflecting the changing tastes of readers. The iconic Plastic Man graced the pages of Quality Comics Police Comics until 1950, leaving a lasting legacy. Timely Comics bid farewell to the Human Torch in 1949, while Marvel Mystery Comics transformed into the horror-themed Marvel Tales. Submariner Comics and Captain America Comics faced closures, marking the end of an era. Harvey Comics' Black Cat underwent a metamorphosis into a horror comic, navigating the evolving comic book landscape. Lev Gleason Publications' Daredevil found itself etched out of the spotlight by the Little Wise Guys in 1950. Fawcett Comics witnessed the cancellation of Whiz Comics, Master Comics, and Captain Marvel Adventures in 1953, with the Marvel family following suit in the subsequent year. This transformative period aligned with the rise of television, prompting media companies to mirror popular culture in comic book narratives. The pages of comic books explored themes of space, mystery, and suspense, echoing the zeitgeist of scientific progress and the societal shift towards atomic power. In this vibrant comic book landscape, new genres emerged, giving birth to long-running humor comics like EC Comics' Mad and Dell's Uncle Scrooge in 1952. Number 13. Playing with dangerous science sets. A kitchen in the 1960s was more than just a place to experiment with food. It was a makeshift laboratory where soda volcanoes erupted and food coloring conjured magic. Amidst culinary wonders and occasional blunders, curious minds found a playground for scientific exploration. However, this era also witnessed the introduction of science sets, playful yet potentially perilous tools for budding scientists. In the realm of 60s science sets, the kitchen wasn't merely a place for cooking. It doubled as a laboratory where soda volcanoes erupted and food coloring made magic. It was a playground for curious minds, witnessing culinary wonders and occasional blunders, all in the spirit of delicious discovery. Combining science and play was a great way to engage kids, but the concept wasn't entirely foolproof during the baby boomer era, thanks to the introduction of something called science sets.
And look, a remote-controlled oil drum loader. The truck moves over to the barrel rack.
These sets were essentially toys that provided kids with all the necessary tools to conduct experiments. The caveat, however, was the safety concern, given the incorporation of chemicals and explosives. Many parents today would likely shy away from giving their kids such potentially hazardous toys. One notable example is the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab, a 1950s science kit that raised eyebrows and radiation levels. This kit included 4 small jars of actual uranium, encouraging young scientists to measure radioactivity, observe radioactive decay, and even prospect for radioactive ores. Yes, the Gilbert Company intended for kids to try their hands at amateur uranium mining. The warning that accompanied the kit was not about health risks, but rather cautioned against bad scientific practice. Users were advised against removing ore samples from their jars, as it could compromise experimental results by increasing background radiation. The Atomic Energy Lab, hitting the market in 1950, stood out as one of the most elaborate science kits of its time. Beyond uranium samples, it boasted beta-alpha, beta, and gamma radiation sources, along with a range of instruments, a cloud chamber, a spinthariscope, an electroscope, and a Geiger counter. The comprehensive kit included a 60-page instruction book and a guide to mining uranium. Adding a touch of whimsy, each kit came with Learn How Dagwood Splits the Atom, a unique blend of comic book and educational manual. Leveraging the popular comic strip characters Blondie and Dagwood Bumstead, along with their children, dog, and friends, the tale explained the basics of atomic energy. In a shrinking adventure, the characters, supervised by Mandrake the Magician, explored the intricacies of splitting an atom of uranium-235. Number 12. Hitchhiking. Nowadays, hitchhiking is often considered as a perilous activity, especially for minors. However, rewind to the era of baby boomers, and hitchhiking was a relatively normal mode of transportation for teenagers and young adults. Back then, sticking a thumb out by the roadside wasn't as alarming as it is today. The level of trust among people was seemingly higher, rooted in a sense of community and familiarity with neighbors. The shift in perception towards hitchhiking can be attributed, in part, to the widespread media coverage of crimes, narrating nightmare stories that have instilled fear and skepticism. Dating back to the Depression and World War II, it used to be very normal to see someone sticking their thumb out and picking them up, notes Alan Pisarowski, a transportation researcher. We lost that somewhere along the way. Experts point out that one of the primary factors in the decline of hitchhiking isn't just a fear of crime. According to David Smith, a British sociologist who studied hitchhiking trends, the substantial growth in car ownership plays a pivotal role. Since the 1960s, the percentage of U.S. households owning cars has steadily risen, with an even faster increase in those with multiple cars. The longevity and affordability of cars have further extended this trend to lower-income families over the past couple of decades. This surge in car ownership has significantly reduced the percentage of population resorting to hitchhiking. In stark contrast, many developing countries, where car ownership is less prevalent, continue to witness hitchhiking as a commonplace mode of transportation. Number 11. Eating sugary cereals.
Honey, honey smacks, dig 'em, make some honey smacking good.
In the landscape of breakfast choices, cereal remains a staple in many households. However, rewind to the era of baby boomers, and the priorities surrounding cereal were less about nutritional content and more about efficiency. Boomers' parents were pragmatic about breakfast. Cereal was an easy-to-prepare option that kids could manage on their own. Processed foods were widely accepted for their convenience, and as long as the taste appealed to the kids, it was deemed good enough. As the Happy Days theme echoed, the weekend comes, my cycle hums, but there was no more humming on Saturdays than just cycles. Kids were buzzing with excitement over the shamelessly sugary cereals lining grocery shelves during the 1950s. This era witnessed the birth of many beloved cereals, fueled by the boom in television and advertising. Companies seized the opportunity to market their products using mascots, captivating children with the allure of sugary delights. Notably, Tony the Tiger, an iconic cereal figure, made his debut in the 1950s. The grocery aisle showcased a sugary symphony with the introduction of cereals like Sugar Pops, Sugar Smacks, and Sugar Frosted Flakes during this era. These sugary delights not only left a lasting impact on the taste buds of baby boomers, but also continue to survive in some form on today's breakfast tables. Number 10. Listening to music on vinyl records. Before the age of Spotify and digital downloads, the tunes that filled the air for baby boomers were curated on the timeless medium of vinyl records. Placing the needle carefully on the record and flipping it halfway through was an art, creating a unique musical experience that resonates with nostalgia. For some, the golden age of vinyl records is intertwined with the 70s and 80s, reaching its zenith in terms of sales. However, others argue that the 50s and 60s epitomized the true golden age, a period etched in the history of music when vinyl records became a cultural phenomenon. The 1950s marked a pivotal moment when vinyl records supplanted earlier formats like shellac gramophone records and magnetic tape cassettes. Technological advancements facilitated mass production, making vinyl records more affordable and accessible to the general public. A hallmark of this era was the diversity of music genres finding a home on vinyl records. From the rhythm and blues to jazz, classical, rock and roll, and pop, these records offered a myriad of sounds and artists. This broad spectrum of musical expression significantly influenced the evolving music culture, bringing the soulful tunes from clubs into the hearts and homes of people. Legendary performers like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin emerged, leaving an indelible mark on the history of music. Their vinyl records became classics, setting a standard for generations of musicians to come. Beyond the tunes, the 1950s and 1960s were a cultural phenomenon where music became a symbol of rebellion, a conduit for emotions, and a catalyst for social change. Vinyl records, acting as carriers of these messages, turned listening to music on turntables into a cultural ritual. Number 9. Writing letters by hand.
But they never expected to find this. It was a stack of love letters.
In the era of instant messaging, the notion of waiting days or even weeks for a response seems alien. Yet for baby boomers, the art of writing letters by hand was a cherished tradition that brought with it the sweet anticipation of a reply. Transport yourself back to 1940s and 1950s Britain, where the written word held a significance far beyond the strokes of a keyboard. With no email to bridge distances swiftly and telephoning being an extravagance, letters became lifelines connecting friends and family. In those days, everyone seemed to possess a special paper reserved explicitly for the sacred act of letter writing. This was known as note paper or writing paper, a personal canvas that reflected the unique personality of the sender. Often it was a customary birthday or Christmas present when gift givers found themselves at a loss. Note paper came in various sizes, typically ranging between A4 and A5, though those designations were not yet in vogue. Foolscap, another size, was more commonly associated with business use. The color palette was limited during World War II and its aftermath, with white being the predominant choice. However, as the 1950s and 1960s unfolded, pale blue emerged as a popular and widely sold option. While some embraced the elegance of dedicated note paper, others, like my mother and her contemporaries, often opted for what they endearingly referred to as a scrap of paper accompanied by a humble brown envelope. For families and friends, this unpretentious approach carried a distinct charm, an embodiment of personal connection. For those who wanted to add a touch of sophistication, there existed the realm of headed note paper, customized with one's address. This paper was a subtle expression of individuality and was readily available for purchase at any stationery store. Like a fine suit tailored to fit, headed note paper became yet another standard offering during birthdays or Christmases. Number 8. Going to a drive-in movie theater. In an era where Gen Zers stream movies on their devices, baby boomers recall a bygone time when the ultimate cinematic experience involved piling into a car and heading to the drive-in movie theater. A social event as much as a visual feast. Can you imagine the joy of those fun-filled nights? While stories of grandparents' Friday night hangouts at the drive-in are common, the history of this classic movie experience is fascinating. The concept traces back to June 6, 1933, when Richard Hollingshead opened the first patented drive-in theater in New Jersey. Conceived as a solution for those uncomfortable in smaller movie theater seats, Hollingshead, inspired by a makeshift drive-in for his mother, marketed it as a family-friendly haven where the whole family is welcome, regardless of how noisy the children are. The success of Hollingshead's drive-in paved the way for many more to emerge across the United States and internationally. However, it was during the 1950s and 60s that drive-ins truly flourished, capturing the hearts of the baby boomer generation. With over 4,000 drive-ins, predominantly in rural areas, they became popular destinations for family outings and affordable date nights. Drive-ins, dependent on favorable weather and limited by seasonal showings, faced challenges during the 1970s oil crisis. The downsizing of cars to save gas money made the drive-in experience less comfortable, and owners seeking to recoup losses shifted to showcasing less family-friendly content. The advent of the VCR further contributed to the decline, offering a more convenient way to enjoy movies at home. Economically, maintaining an effective drive-in required vast acreage, prompting many owners to close establishments and sell land to developers or malls or multi-building complexes. Slowly, the allure of the drive-in diminished. Yet the memories endure. The big screen spectacles, the laughter at comedy classics, and the magic of the theater experience from the cozy confines of one's car on a warm summer night. Number 7. Using encyclopedias for research. In the pre-internet era, the quest for knowledge led baby boomers to the shelves of encyclopedias for their school projects. Unlike today's instant Google searches, they had to flip through volumes, exploring page by page for the answers they sought. In the early 20th century, the Encyclopedia Britannica reached its 11th edition, and affordable options like Hamsworth's Universal Encyclopedia and Everyman's Encyclopedia became commonplace. The 1920s witnessed the emergence of popular and accessible encyclopedias like Hamsworth's and the Children's Encyclopedia. In the 1950s and 1960s in the United States marked the introduction of large, widely distributed encyclopedias, often marketed through installment plans. World Book and Funk and Wagnalls were notable players, with up to 90% of sales occurring door-to-door. Encyclopedia salespeople, once ubiquitous, became the subject of jokes. Lynch's book, You Could Look It Up, describes their sales pitch as offering not just books but a lifestyle and a promise of social mobility. A 1961 World Book ad emphasized holding your family's future in your hands. The latter half of the 20th century witnessed the publication of encyclopedias synthesizing topics in specific fields, often through works authored by prominent researchers. Examples include the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, first published in 1967, and Elsevier's Handbook in Economics series. This trend has persisted into the 20th century, with encyclopedias covering a single volume or more for diverse academic disciplines, delving into narrow topics like bioethics and African American history. Number 6. Developing photos from a film camera. In the bygone era of film cameras, baby boomers experienced a unique process in preserving memories. Unlike today's instant digital photos, capturing a moment meant using a film camera and then patiently waiting for the film to be developed. The excitement of finally seeing those photographs was unparalleled. From baby boomers to Generation X, the tangible remnants of their memories lie in boxes filled with movie reels, slides, audio tapes, and expensive print collections. These archives span family histories from the 1800s through the early 2000s. Cherished photos, newspaper clippings, war mementos, and other memorabilia find a home in albums and scrapbooks, some with pockets or sticky magnetic sheets. Sharing memories has evolved with the times. While they now enjoy sending photos via email or text, the preference for original prints remains strong. These prints often find their places in frames, collages, or traditional albums. Despite the prevalence of cell phones, there's a lingering discomfort with technology, leading many to seek assistance with photo editing. Social media is embraced for staying connected, although sharing is done with a certain restraint. The cautious approach to technology extends to storage methods, with many opting for external hard drives over the cloud, reflecting a learned wariness. Number 5. Hanging out at soda shops.
Ooh, little squirt of chocolate.
Picture this. Red pleather booths, the aroma of juicy burgers wafting through the air, Coca-Cola's fizzing in glasses, the nostalgic hum of a jukebox, and a dance floor where the tunes of the 1950s played. This was the quintessential scene of a 1950s-era soda fountain. Originally nestled in the corner of drugstores or pharmacies, soda fountains had a medicinal origin, offering carbonated drinks infused with plant extracts and syrups. Over time, their focus transitioned from medicine to becoming social hubs for food and drink. In the 1950s, these social fountains transformed into popular hangout spots, where friends and romantic pairs could gather around milkshakes and French fries, taking breaks between songs for a dance or two. During this era, while McDonald's had just made its debut in 1953, it hadn't yet gained the popularity it has today. Teenagers of the time preferred the ambiance of small diners and greasy spoons, where jukeboxes and soda fountains provided the backdrop for their social escapades. A vivid memory from an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. in 1958 involved seeking out the nearest diner, savoring hamburgers, and listening to Elvis tunes on the jukebox. The 1950s soda fountains served as more than just places to grab a drink. They were the beating hearts of social interaction for teens and young adults in towns across America, offering not just tasty beverages and ice cream, but an experience that cannot be replicated today. These soda shops were where connections were forged and memories were made. This was a great time in American history that cannot be replaced. Number 4. A look at hobby kits. In 1955, the Wall Street Journal hailed the booming popularity of hobby kits, noting how makers of model planes, ships, trains, and autos were riding a wave of enthusiastic demand from both schoolboys and grown-ups alike. Sales figures soared to an estimated $100 million, with a significant increase over the preceding year, and experts predicted yet another record-breaking year in 1955. For many individuals, hobby kits were more than just a pastime. They were a gateway to lifelong passions and even careers. Take, for example, one young man who started by building model boats as a hobby and eventually progressed to constructing real boats in his basement. His love for boats spurred him to pursue a career in the Navy. Stamp collecting, another cherished hobby of the era, had enthusiasts collecting more than just stamps. One Montana woman, for instance, had a fervor for bright copper kettles. Starting with a kettle inherited from her mother, handmade by her grandfather in Finland, she amassed a collection of 106 kettles of various shapes and sizes. Hobby shows emerged as popular events across the country, offering enthusiasts a platform to showcase their creation and skills. These shows served not only as opportunities for individuals to exhibit their hobbies, but also as venues for discovering new interests and observing demonstrations by local crafters. The Montana Winter Hobby Show of 1952, for instance, featured a diverse array of crafts, including ceramics, painting, wood carving, beadwork, sculpture, and more. Even institutions like the Emergency Hospital in Washington, D.C. organized their own hobby shows to highlight the talents of their staff. Nurses showcased handmade puppets, surgeons displayed model boats, and an X-ray technician proudly exhibited prize-winning orchids. The event even included a light-hearted entry from the hospital's chief dietitian, a cat named Minnie, entered for her exceptional appearance. As the Evening Star advised, youth was seen as the ideal time to explore hobbies that could enrich one's life with health and happiness. The publication recommended starting with easily accessible collectibles such as animal figurines, natural specimens like shells and rocks, or travel souvenirs like luggage labels and postcards. Number 3. Bowling.
Here is Bill Hardwick.
In the 1950s, bowling became more than just a sport. It was a cultural phenomenon that brought together millions of Americans. With approximately 20 million people sharing a common interest, bowling wasn't merely a game. It was a social activity that transcended demographics. As Lonnie B's 1941 cover depicted, bowling was an enjoyable pastime that provided a welcome distraction from the looming war in Europe. It wasn't confined to any specific gender. Both men and women embraced the sport. Television placed a pivotal role in catapulting bowling into mainstream popularity during the 1950s. Channel 4 featured 5 bowling shows a week, making it a staple in American households. NBC's Championship Bowling in the 1950s marked the first network coverage of the sport, paving the way for an explosion in popularity. Other shows like Make That Spare, Celebrity Bowling, and Bowling for Dollars further fueled the bowling craze. In 1961, ABC made history by becoming the first network to telecast competition from the Pro Bowlers Association. Bowling, whether pin bowling, or most commonly 10-pin bowling, or target bowling, such as lawn bowls, found its place as a target sport and recreational activity. The sport's inclusivity took a significant step in 1950 when the American Bowling Congress opened its membership to African Americans and other minorities. The Women's International Bowling Congress, or WIBC, followed suit the next year, reflecting the changing societal landscape. Around 1950, the golden age of 10-pin bowling dawned, transforming professional bowlers into well-compensated athletes. During this era, their salaries rivaled those of players in major sports like baseball, football, and hockey. The heyday of professional bowling continued until the late 1970s. Number 2. The 1950s sports craze. The 1950s marked an era of unparalleled growth in the popularity of sports, fueled in part by the widespread broadcast of sporting events on television. The New York Yankees' decade-long dominance in professional baseball, alongside the increasing integration of black athletes into various sports, captured the nation's attention. The era saw the rise of iconic figures like Mickey Mantle, Johnny Unitas, Bob Cousy, and Gordie Howe, creating a time for heroes. In this simpler sports landscape, professional football began to surpass college football in popularity, while professional basketball attracted a growing audience. The launch of Sports Illustrated, the country's first sports weekly, further fueled America's sports craze. The simplicity of the times is underscored by the absence of complex elements such as salary caps, free agency, strikes, or lockouts. Baby boomers born between 1946 and 1965 grew up immersed in the golden age of sports heroes. They witnessed iconic moments, from Arnold Palmer hitching his trousers up as he lined up a putt, to Rocky Marciano's retirement after winning his 49th straight fight. In 1958, as they began to dream about their own athletic feats, Johnny Unitas led the Baltimore Colts to the NFC Championship in an overtime victory against the New York Giants. The 1950s boasted 16 Major League Baseball teams, 12 NFL teams, 8 NBA teams, and 6 NHL teams. Boomer sports enthusiasts learned team lineups by heart and could recite statistics effortlessly. The era was characterized by stability, with players remaining with their teams for extended periods. However, the sports landscape underwent a radical transformation after the Boomers' formative years. The number of major sports franchises exploded to 115 teams, and the financial dynamic shifted dramatically. The $100,000 salary ceiling for top sports stars gave way to multi-million-dollar contracts, propelled by the advent of free agency, an embodiment of rampant individualism. Free agency is a prime example of the individual over the establishment, notes Rosenblatt, emphasizing how the boomer generation ushered in a legacy of asserting individual rights. The yearning for the simplicity of the past is reflected in the boomers' generation's affinity for old-style ballparks like Camden Yards and Coors Field, as well as the enjoyment of watching players don throwback uniforms, a nostalgic embrace of the bygone era when heroes were born and sports were uncomplicated. Number 1. The birth of rock and roll. In the late 1940s, the fusion of white country musicians experimenting with blues rhythms gave rise to a revolutionary music genre known as rockabilly. As the 1950s dawned, rockabilly evolved into the iconic rock and roll, a genre that would become synonymous with teenage rebellion and freedom. Rock and roll, characterized by its energetic rhythms and themes of young love and liberation from societal constraints, gained immense popularity among American teens in the 1950s. The pivotal figure in popularizing this genre was disc jockey Alan Freed, who not only named rock and roll, but also played a crucial role in its propagation. His radio shows in Cleveland and the organization of the first rock and roll concert solidified his influence, later extending to New York. The rebellious undertones embedded in many rock and roll songs resonated strongly with the teenage audience. In 1954, Bill Haley and his Comets delivered an anthem for youthful defiance with Rock Around the Clock. Featured in the 1955 film Blackboard Jungle, the song underscored the call for teenagers to assert their independence against adult authority. Bill Haley's success highlighted how white artists could draw inspiration from African American musicians and achieve mainstream acclaim. This trend continued with the ascent of Elvis Presley, a teenage heartthrob who broke down color barriers by embracing the musical motives of African American artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard. And there you have it, 20 iconic aspects of baby boomers' daily life in the 1950s. If you enjoyed this nostalgic ride, give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgia. Until next time, stay tuned.